Good morning. This is Krista McAuliffe, live from the Challenger, and I'm going to be taking you through a field trip.
That morning felt ordinary. The air was clear. The sky was calm. For a brief moment, it seemed like just another routine launch. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger lifted off with 7 astronauts aboard, each one believing they were beginning another historic mission. 73 seconds later, everything went wrong. The explosion tore across the sky in full view of millions watching live. Classrooms, living rooms, and newsrooms froze in disbelief as the shuttle vanished into smoke and fire. But the tragedy didn't end with that explosion, because what investigators later discovered was far more unsettling. Evidence suggested that at least some members of the crew may have survived the initial breakup of the shuttle. So what really happened in those final moments after Challenger came apart? And what did NASA uncover when they searched the ocean below? To understand the truth, we have to go back to the beginning. The explosion. The explosion wasn't one sudden blast. It was a chain of failures that happened in seconds. A few seconds after launch, the fire escaping from the right booster burned through the fuel tank. The liquid hydrogen and oxygen inside mixed and ignited, tearing the shuttle apart. To viewers on the ground, it looked like a single massive explosion. But technically, it was the orbiter breaking apart under stress and heat. The shuttle was traveling at nearly 3,000 feet per second. The sudden loss of structure caused it to disintegrate in mid-air. Fragments of the boosters, fuel tank, and main cabin scattered across the sky. Engineers later described it as a rapid structural breakup rather than a true detonation. The force separated the crew cabin from the rest of the orbiter. It stayed mostly intact as it continued rising to a height of around 65,000 feet before beginning its fall. This small detail changed everything about how investigators understood the disaster. Inside that cabin were 7 astronauts, still strapped to their seats. At least 3 of them had activated their emergency air packs, which could only have been done by hand. The switch on one pack was located behind the pilot's seat, meaning another crew member had to reach over and turn it on. This showed that some of them were conscious after the breakup. No voice transmissions were recorded from the cabin after the explosion. It is believed that communication systems failed instantly. Investigators later suggested that the crew may have lost cabin pressure, causing them to lose consciousness within seconds. But there was no evidence of an immediate fatal event. The cabin then began to fall back toward the ocean. The descent lasted nearly 3 minutes. It ended when the compartment struck the Atlantic at more than 200 miles per hour, a force far beyond human survival. Even so, the question remained: how did NASA find the cabin in the vast ocean, and what did they discover inside? To answer that, the search had to move from the sky to the sea. Because the shuttle did not completely explode, the main crew cabin had separated and was still intact. And what happened inside during those final moments would raise questions no one was prepared to face. The launch day. From the very beginning, things didn't look right. The morning of January 28, 1986, was unusually cold in Florida. Ice had formed on the launch pad overnight. Engineers warned that the freezing temperatures could affect the shuttle's hardware, especially the rubber O-rings that sealed the joints of the solid rocket boosters. Those rings were never designed to function in such low temperatures. Despite multiple warnings, NASA decided to proceed with the launch after several previous delays. At 11:38 a.m., the Space Shuttle Challenger lifted off from Cape Canaveral. On board were 7 astronauts: Francis R. Scobie, Michael J. Smith, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Judith Resnick, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe. the first civilian teacher chosen to fly in space. Across the United States, millions of people, including students in classrooms, watched the launch live. In the first minute, everything appeared normal. The boosters fired as planned, and the shuttle climbed steadily through a clear sky. Mission Control reported normal readings. For NASA, this was supposed to be a moment of pride after multiple postponements. From the outside, things looked perfect. But deep inside the right solid rocket booster, a small flaw was growing. The cold had hardened the O-ring, preventing it from sealing a joint completely. A thin jet of flame began leaking from the gap. Within seconds, the fire burned through the lower section of the booster and reached the external fuel tank, which contained over 2 million liters of liquid hydrogen and oxygen. At 73 seconds after liftoff, the tank failed under extreme pressure. It ruptured violently, releasing the fuel in an explosive cloud. The Challenger broke apart in the sky, scattering debris across the Atlantic Ocean. From the ground, it appeared as a bright flash, followed by 2 trails of white smoke. People watching were silent, unsure of what had happened. Mission Control quickly confirmed what many feared. The vehicle had exploded. Every major news network replayed the footage again and again. The shock spread worldwide. It was the first time a space mission had ended like this, in full view of the public. Initially, everyone assumed the crew had died instantly, but later investigations revealed something different. Inside the falling cabin, when the Challenger broke apart, most of its structure disintegrated in mid-air. But the crew cabin did not. It separated from the main body and remained mostly intact. Made of reinforced aluminum, it was strong enough to survive the initial breakup. Engineers later calculated that the cabin continued to rise after the explosion, reaching an altitude of about 65,000 feet, before beginning its fall. From that point, it followed a long, curved path toward the Atlantic Ocean. The entire descent lasted almost 3 minutes. Inside, the 7 astronauts were still strapped to their seats. Evidence recovered later showed that several had tried to respond. 3 personal air packs had been switched on. The activation could only have been done manually, indicating that at least some of the crew were still conscious after the breakup. One of the clearest indications was that pilot Michael J. Smith's air pack had been turned on, even though its switch was located behind his seat. This meant that another crew member had reached over to activate it for him. Investigators also found cockpit switches moved from their original positions, likely in an attempt to restore power or control. However, there were no systems that could have saved them. The shuttle had no parachutes or emergency ejection methods that worked at such altitude and speed. Communication had already been lost, and the cabin had no way to stabilize itself during the fall. Experts later suggested 2 possibilities. Some believed that the cabin depressurized quickly, causing unconsciousness within seconds. Others thought a partial pressure might have remained for a short time, keeping them conscious for part of the descent. The exact sequence could not be determined. When the cabin struck the ocean at a speed of over 200 miles per hour, the impact produced a force more than 200 times the pull of gravity. The structure shattered instantly. No human could survive such a collision. The wreckage then sank rapidly, descending more than 100 feet below the surface. Debris spread across a wide area of the seafloor. For days, recovery teams searched the ocean surface, but only scattered fragments appeared. The main cabin had disappeared beneath the waves. No one yet knew where it had landed or what condition it was in. Finding it would become one of the most difficult recovery missions NASA had ever faced. The Challenger crew showed the world what real courage looks like. Their mission was cut short, but their legacy never was. They remind us that exploration has always carried risk, and that progress has never come without sacrifice. So how should we remember Challenger? As a failure that should never have happened, or as a moment that forced humanity to confront the true cost of reaching beyond our limits? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful, give the video a like. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing. We'll be sharing more powerful stories like this in the weeks ahead. Until next time, take care.